engaged and learning about it. But the way that my colleagues operate, once they hear that we had, 50, 60 people here, they're all going to want to do this. And I hope they do in their own communities, and people start to learn more about this process that goes on in Hartford every day. I do want to introduce to you one friend of mine, Andrew Feinstein, is here. The reason I asked Andy to be here is because I've promised this to be a nonpartisan event, not about policy, but just a process, okay? But the fact is, at the end of the day, I am a Republican. That's not news to any of you, I'm sure. Andy is not a Republican, not even close. Fair? Fair. But Andy, he is an advocate for SEEK, which stands for Special Education Equity for Kids. Yeah, all right. A lot of acronyms up in Hartford. We get used to them. But the point is, he's in the building almost every day, as much as I am, if not more than I am, and he knows this process quite well. And so I asked him to be here so that there's, if folks are here from a different political ideology than me, you can trust that the process that I'm explaining to you is the process. And if not, Andy will throw a challenge flag and yell at me. Okay. So thanks all for being here. Brett, we lost it. Whatever you did is not working. Okay. All right. So that's your state capitol. If you've never been there before, you should definitely visit. It's a gorgeous building. That's the address. You just simply MapQuest or GPS right to it. But that's the building. Do you want to say something? Oh, okay. Inside the Capitol, we have the House of Representatives. So this is sort of looking from the gallery. This is where the speaker stands, obviously, and this is the gallery. This is members of the public. Members of the public cannot generally come into the chamber unless you're accompanied by a guest. If you ever want to go up there and come into the chamber, let me know. I'm always happy to have folks in there. Where's Bob? Do we need more chairs? Okay. Yeah, there's more chairs against the back walls if you need them, ladies. So this is, but this is accessible to the public at all times, so they can watch the proceedings going on inside the House of Representatives. There's 151 seats in this building, in this room. Right now, the line is about here. Republicans sit over here, Democrats sit over here, but we generally run around often. So while you can't, if you come to the Capitol on a session day, come in and out of the chamber, legislators are in and out all day long. We don't just sit in there the entire time. First of all, we're there 14, 16 hours sometimes. We have to use the facilities. We have to eat. And especially like me, I don't sit still well. So I'm constantly moving around. So the point is, if you want to interact with your legislator face to face, that is a great time to do it. When there's a session day, you can show up there and catch them coming in and out. That's a Senate chamber. I try to go in there very often because there's something wrong with the air and it sucks all the knowledge out of your head, and that's what happens. But as you can see, there's only 36 seats, and I'm just kidding. I love 35 of them, actually. So, but that's that. In fact, I think this is probably Kathy Austin's seat right here. And this is probably a budget day because you can see the budget there that she had to do. All right, next to the Capitol is the Legislative Office Building. That's 300 Capitol Avenue. That's where all of our offices are, but more importantly for you, that's where all of the hearing rooms are. So we'll talk about public hearings and committee meetings shortly. That is the building, and that is the main entrance. When you walk in the main entrance, this is what you see here. There's 5 floors there. The first and second floor are committee meetings, are committee rooms, or hearing rooms. The third, fourth floor are legislative offices. Generally, the Senate's on the third floor, the House members are on the fourth floor, but I'm on the third floor because I'm ranking member on public safety. So Pat and I are our own little section, but generally that's it. And the fifth floor is what we call our nonpartisan offices. We'll talk more about them in a minute, but that's like our legislative commissioner's office, the Office of Policy and Management, Office of Fiscal Analysis, Office of Legislative Research. These are nonpartisan state employees that work with us.
So when the building was designed, the idea was that everybody had an office exactly the same size.
Yeah.
They're all tucked away.
Right.
So can't find an address.
Oh. No, he won't be talking.
Back corners.
Right. Yeah, you want a microphone, Andy, just for when you add. Yeah. Because we're streaming live and it doesn't work otherwise. All right, so these are 2 different hearing rooms. So generally, some of our smaller committees meet in the room to the left there. So what happens is the legislators sit here, only legislators. So these are all legislators here. this is where the audience sits or they're waiting, and whoever's testifying sits at that desk. Same thing happens here. What makes this different? Our committees, and we'll talk about the committees, are different sizes. Some committees are only 15 people, some committees are 50. So obviously, if it's a larger committee like Judicial, Appropriations, Public Health, we use the bigger committee rooms, and the person who is testifying sits at this desk here. Looks intimidating, but if you get to know my colleagues a little bit, there's no reason to be intimidated up there. Andy testifies all the time, and he's never intimidated. So last sort of geography thing, this is just to show you the Capitol is here to the Gold Dome. That's the Legislative Office Building. You can walk outside. However, you can't, the public can't get back in this entrance because there's no security monitors there. You'd have to walk all the way around. But more importantly, underneath, you can walk on the concourse. So once you pass security to get into the LOB or the Capitol, as long as you stay in the concourse, you can go back and forth without having to.
Can you go back
up.
one slide?
Yeah.
Free parking.
Yeah.
Now, legislators get the upper floors. The first floor is for visitors in the and that fills up by 10 o'clock on any day. And then
Yeah.
there's a
I don't know. I have my own
basement.
spot.
There's a basement where you usually can find parking. But free parking in Hartford is really worth the trip.
Yeah. And if you're ever going up there for something, by the way, and it's a busy, obviously, if it's a busy day, I'll probably be there. But if I'm not there, you can have my spot. All right. So let's jump into how things happen. So a couple of things prompted me to do this. One relevant to this screen is I've had multiple people find a bill online and send it to me and say, this is the law. See? Oh, that's not a law. That's a bill. Some of you are a bit older, probably recognize this character from, was it School of Rock? Is that right? But anyway, so a bill starts out in the upper left-hand corner, and then every bill has a series of obstacles that it needs to go over, or in this case, hurdles. So a bill comes up as a proposed bill. It's an idea, and we'll just say for a minute that I decided that I think for safety reasons, every vehicle registered in the state of Connecticut should be yellow. Okay, let's make up something silly. So that was my idea. And the first thing that I need my bill to do is get past the committee. So a bill like that would go to our transportation committee. The committee would look at it and say, do we want to discuss this or not? And if the committee members say no, that bill's dead, stops at that obstacle. If the committee members say, yeah, that's a good idea, maybe we should talk about that, then they'll raise that bill. Okay. There's a couple ways they can do that. We'll get to it. So it's clear the first hurdle. Now it's here. So now this is where it's really important for you to know what's going on, because now we have a public hearing, and it's exactly that. The public has opportunities to come in and say why they agree or don't agree with the bill, or I agree with the bill with some changes. That happens all the time. I would sit down and say, well, I agree with making the cars yellow, but I also think they should have a black stripe. All right. So you could add your own sort of opinions on it, and we'll talk about testifying in a few minutes. So once that happens, it cleared that hurdle. The next hurdle is committee action. So the Transportation Committee then takes that bill, we'll say it's Bill 1000, and they're going to vote on it by a majority vote of the members of the committee. So if the Transportation Committee says by majority, yes, we like this idea, then it's cleared that hurdle. If not, it dies at that hurdle. So once the committee pushes it out, we're going to go into more in depth. If you're getting a little bit nervous, don't worry. This is just to give you an overview. So I learned when I took instruction class years ago, there's two types of learners, global learners and analytical learners. Some of you learn by getting everything at once. Some of you need the pieces. So what I do is I give you everything at once and then the pieces and everything at once again. So bear with me. So he's cleared that hurdle. Now he's got to go through this metal detector. And the reason I use the metal detector is because the nonpartisan offices are not a hurdle. You're guaranteed to get through. But much like a metal detector, you walk through, you're definitely getting through, but they're going to know everything that's in you, right? They're going to know everything you have. And that's what OLR and OFA do. They're going to give you an Office of Legislative Research report as to what's in that bill. And an Office of Fiscal Analysis will tell you what that bill is going to cost, if anything. What it will cost the state, what it will cost municipalities, what it will cost, say, ratepayers, for example, if it hits electric bills, okay? So you see there, he says, oh no, not another committee already did that, because sometimes bills get referred back to other committees, and we'll look at that in a minute, but we'll just pretend he didn't in this case. He made it out. So then If it's a House bill, it goes to the House first. If it's a Senate bill, it goes to the Senate first. And it doesn't really matter. Politically, it kind of does, but it doesn't really matter where it goes first because it has to clear both. So let's just say it's a House bill because it was my idea. That makes it a House bill, and my colleagues in the House vote on it, and then it goes to the Senate and they never vote on it. It dies here, does not become law. But if I get my Senate friends, if I can find any Senate friends at any given moment in time, they vote on it, it comes over here, then the governor puts his ink on it, and it becomes a law. And that's essentially how it happens. Now, the legislature works a lot like the English language. The English language is A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y. I before E, except after C. Well, the legislature is much like that. So this is the most fundamental way it should happen, but there's a lot of anomalies, and we're going to go over those in just a second. So, what's the matter?
It gets very complicated.
It does, but we're going to try to simplify it.
But I do want to say first that I would say 95% of the legislation that comes out of Connecticut legislature is bipartisan. It is a very nonpartisan legislature, bipartisan legislature. There are a few big things where there are partisan fights.
Right.
But
and on those things, the big problem on the partisan things is that the Democrats are wrong. All right. So anyway, just joking. I'm just kidding, Andy. Can you click on that, Brett, for me, 24-32 in the upper right-hand corner? Oh. You don't have it on your screen? Right there. This one. Yeah. Now can you make that come up there? Sorry.
We're screening it.
What's that?
We're screening.
Yeah. Screening's coming.
Did we do these slides?
Yes.
You did. Okay.
Well, Kareem designed some of them. But
I've got to say that I worked for years in the U.S. Congress, and there is very little comparison between the two processes. This is and I've also worked in the New York legislature, which has even a different process. So it is something unique to Connecticut. And in fact, there's some ancient language, particularly in the Senate, when the president of the Senate asks, does what she does, she uses language that comes from the 1700s.
if it's problematic, Brett, we can switch to we can go back. I should have just put a screenshot in the slideshow. Sorry. Well, while he figures that out. So when a bill gets proposed, let me just talk about this briefly. So no, you can just go back to the slideshow. I'll show them that after. We could do it when we go to, we'll take a look at it in a minute.
You can also go to your phone and go to the CGA website, and under bills, type 24-32, and it'll come up.
Okay, can you scroll down a little bit?
There it is.
All right, so I intentionally just picked a random bill. So scroll down a little bit more, Brett. All right, so you can actually watch this bill. Just a little bit more. Right there. All right, so you can actually watch this bill as it went through the committee. The bill came to the Committee on Public Safety and Security. This was an agency bill. So this was the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection asked for this piece of legislation. But you can see what happened. It came to our Committee on Public Safety. Now, a lot of the examples I'm going to give you have to do with public safety because, that's one of the committees I'm in leadership on. So I know the bills quite well. Public hearing happened on February 29th. Don't be confused by this date. This was the date that it hit the system. Notice it's at least 5 days before the public hearing. Very important to guys like Andy, okay? On March 19th, there was a joint favorable. Joint favorable means that the committee decided jointly, and we'll talk about why it means jointly, that they were going to move on with this bill. Then it went to LCO. It went to OLR, the metal detector. It went to OLR and OFA, came back out. Favorable report, because it was a joint favorable, tabled for the House calendar. The House had it. The House members voted on it on May 1st, came back out, went to the Senate, Senate passed on May 7th on consent, like they do everything. Scroll up a little bit more, Brett, for me.
Before you scroll up, I just want to point out You look at this list of co-sponsors, they're all Republicans.
Nuh-uh. Travis Sims.
All right. Okay. Yeah, one.
Okay.
But and, it's a overwhelmingly Democratic controlled legislature. But here we have a bill that is sponsored fundamentally by Republicans that passes, becomes law, signed by a Democratic governor. So just my point about this
All right, can we
being
go back to the
a
slide,
bipartisan legislature.
Oh. How many cameras you got on me? A bunch. Cameras at 10 pounds. You got like 6 cameras on. All right. Am I good? No, I'm not good. It's not moving. Okay. All right. So let's run through this in a bit more detail. So a proposed bill is an idea that a legislator has. Now, generally speaking, odd years like we're in right now, 2025 is what we call the long session. Long session, Hartford runs from the first Wednesday after the first Monday in January to the first Wednesday after the first Monday in June. So if you call me in July and say, hey, can you put this bill in tomorrow? No, I can't put this bill until next year. We're not in session. Okay. So odd years, January to June, always the first Wednesday after the first Monday. Even years, February to May, much shorter session. By design, the shorter session was designed to make budget adjustments and bills that committees found necessary. So what that means is, in the odd years, like we are right now, any legislator can propose a bill. There's 7,000 of them, okay? And we write the biannual budget. Next year when we come in, no legislator can put in any bills. Can't happen. Unless it has to do with the budget. So if you come to me, say in July and say, Greg, I really want to change cars, that they all need to be yellow. I want you to get that bill in. I can't even put the bill in next year because it's not, it has nothing to do with the budget. So what I have to do is I have to go to my friends in transportation and say, guys, will you please raise this as a committee bill? Okay. So I have to ask the committee to raise it. That's the whole design was supposed to be. So there were committee bills and budget adjustments. What it's basically turned into is a long session compressed into 3 months. It's an absolute marathon. Shana knows, she lives it. And all I do is my inbox, instead of getting 140 bills referred to me from legislators, I get 140 emails from legislators begging me to raise the bill because, I'm in leadership on public safety if it has to do with public safety. And that's it. So proposed bill happens. It goes to the committee of cognizance. Wait, what is a committee? And how do these committees get formed? So in Hartford, we have joint committees, which means, unlike down in Washington, D.C., every committee has representatives and senators on. Okay. Now, obviously, there's 151 House members and 36 senators. So as you can imagine, there are far more House members on the committee than there are senators. Because the Democrats have a 2-to-1 majority, for the most part, the committees are representative of that majority. So for every 1 Republican on public safety, there's 2 Democrats. The problem with the Senate, and I love my Senate colleagues, all 35 to 36 of them. One of them I could do without, but 35 of them are great. And the problem with senators is they are on like 9 or 10 committees. And most of these committees meet at the same time, which means despite what any of them will tell you, they can't possibly be that intimately involved in all of their committee work because time is a finite resource. There's only 24 hours in a day. So the House members sort of dominate the committees a little bit because there's more of us and we're more like I only have 3 committees. I think Heather's got 9 as an example, right? And they all meet at the same time.
The one real exception to that is Kathy Austin, who's chairman of appropriations and lives and breathes appropriation 24/7.
Yeah. Well, right. And there are people like Steve Stastrom, because he has such a heavy lift on judiciary, he just has 1. But for the most part, senators have 8 or 9. House members have 3, maybe 4. So if you live in my district, those are the committees I serve on. So the committee leadership is made up of co-chairs. The chairmen run the committees. One is a senator, one is a representative. So for example, in public safety, Pat Boyd is the House chair and Aaron Gaston is the Senate chair. And then we have 2 ranking members, and those are the lead Republicans on the committee. And obviously in public safety, it's me and the senator is Paul Ciccarella. So those are that makes up the leadership of the committee. And we're going to talk why that's important in a minute. These are some of the committees that we have. We have A committees and B committees. A committees meet can meet on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, B committees Tuesday, Thursday, which doesn't mean they have to. For example, today was Thursday, public safety is a B committee. We didn't meet today. We met Tuesday. We didn't have any business to take up today, so we didn't meet today. The A committees are your more heavy lifts, right? They cover more issues. They're more time consuming. Judiciary, education, appropriations, public health, environment. Those are some of your A committees. Some of your certainly finance, revenue, and bonding. These are your two money committees right here. This committee decides how you're going to be taxed and where the revenue is coming, and this committee decides how that money is going to be spent. So if you take that to like my house, for example, on the finance committee, I decide how money's coming in, Shana decides where it goes. That's how my house works, much like the legislature. All right. So when the bills get referred to committee, we have what's called screening.
What would difference between this and Washington? Bonding is a real option here, and it's a way to avoid appropriations and guardrails and all that. And it's widely used for that reason. And so the bond bill each year is as big as the budget implementation bill, and contains some stuff that, whether it's really bondable is another question.
Down in DC, you mean?
No, here.
Oh, our bond bill. Yeah. Oh, they've got, well, I'll keep this away from that. All right. So then it goes to screening. So what happens in screening is, and I'll just use this year, for example, of all the bills that my colleagues put in, 140 of them came to public safety, which means that we were the committee of cognizance. So public safety has committee of cognizance over all things fire, police, building officials. We used to have gambling, that went to general law. Some things are obvious, right? Education has to do with schools, goes to education, but sometimes it's not all that clear. Like if you're talking about a few years ago, we had a vaccine bill, mandated vaccines for kids starting school. Well, maybe it's an education bill. Maybe it's a public health bill. Maybe it's a children's bill. So there's a lot of crossover, and the committees have to kind of cooperate to see what makes the most sense. And sometimes it goes to multiple committees, which we'll look at. So 140 bills come. Heron, Pat, myself, and Paul get in a room, and we start sifting through them. And we say, which of these bills are worthwhile, given our time constraints, given the makeup of our committee. We'll look at a bill. One of my colleagues every year puts in a bill that says the Second Amendment is your right to carry firearms. You don't need a pistol permit. We should do away with them. That's his idea. That's a great idea. I love it. That's fine. But it's never going to make it, right? It's not realistic. We don't even bother hearing it. It's a waste of time. So we kind of put that aside, and I call him and say, hey, Rob, not this year. And I'll should just record that and play that for him every year because he does every year. So that bill, for example, would be dead, right? So we'll pick on Andy. Andy proposed a bill. Nobody liked it. In screening leadership decided we don't want to hear this bill. His bill dies right there. Let's call it Bill 1500. Dead. Brett puts in a bill. It's Bill 1501. It's a good idea, whatever, and it's alive. So now it's moving on. So once it moves on, we either raise Brett's bill. So he proposes a bill. It's Bill 1501, and we raise it.
Let me criticize the screen. The red arrow, it should be much bigger than the green arrow.
Yeah, well, there's more to come. Okay, yeah.
Many more bills die in screening than advance to hearings.
So we could take Brett's bill and raise it and go forward with it. But more often than not, what happens is Brett's bill is an idea that 15 other people had. So what we do is we raise it as a committee bill. And that all Brett and all of the 15 other people can put their name on it too. That way it's not an argument of whose bill it was, because there's a lot of politics in that building. Or we could raise it for a subject matter public hearing, which means we don't actually put any language to it. We just say, okay, public, tell us what you think about cars being yellow. And there'd be no language. And sometimes it gets absorbed into a concept, which is the same thing. Now, can you see that yellow arrow? Here's one of your I before E's except after C. Now, if you were to look at Brett's bill, 1501, on the system, it would say, refer to the Public Safety Committee and nothing else. It would appear that it died. But that same bill is actually in a committee bill, same language. So you got to kind of follow the bouncing ball. And that's where things get a little bit complicated. Okay, so if you look at all of my proposed bills, you would probably see that they're all dead. But they're really not, because they're absorbed into committee bills. All right, so once the committee raises a bill, we have a public hearing. So what does that mean? That means that you can sign up to come to Hartford or virtually offer your opinion on that particular piece of legislation. Happens all day long. How many people did you have yesterday? Or was it, yeah, yesterday?
Well, yesterday for education, there were 154.
No, today, sorry.
154 witnesses. Today for the education appropriations, there were 275 witnesses.
Yeah, like 175 of them for Danbury schools, right? No, I'm just kidding.
There are
So,
a few on that.
so sometimes we have hundreds of people who want to testify. And
I'll tell you, the big one yesterday that people wanted to talk about was cell phones in schools.
well, Children's had a long one the other day. The public hearings are actually interesting. And Shane says I'm a dork about this, but they are interesting. But members of the public come. Often we get lobbyists. Would you consider yourself a lobbyist?
I'm not paid, so I'm not registered as a
Okay.
lobbyist, but
Activists.
yeah,
right?
I'm a lobbyist.
Okay.
But not paid.
Other elected officials such as mayors, first selectmen, they all give feedback on a bill. Now, what's interesting is I'm a legislator, right? But I also live here. So I can testify at public hearing on a bill, provided it's not in my committee. So if there's a bill before judiciary, education, or public safety, I cannot testify at public hearing. But any other bill, any other committee, I can go and testify. They give priority to legislators, which they shouldn't, but anyway. So,
Well, let me just talk about public hearings. Guys like this sit for 12, 15 hours, often starting at 3 in the afternoon and going overnight, listening to every single person who signs up. Everybody has 3 minutes to talk. And, after a while, members just won't ask questions anymore to move it along. But it's just amazing that these legislators spend hours listening to testimony, some of which is interesting and a lot of which is repetitive and boring.
but it's important, right? And that's why, to Andy's point, I try to stay there because, look, it's not my government. It's not my seat. It's not my chamber. And it's not my committee. It's yours. And that's the whole point of why I did this tonight. And that's why I try to stay there and engage. We're going to talk about that right now. Does it really matter? Well, yes. The answer is it does matter. And so the public hearings are posted with 5 days notice. You have plenty of time to sign up. You can sign up until, I think, 5 o'clock the day before. 5 o'clock?
5 o'clock's when the list comes out. Yeah.
So you can participate in person by driving to Hartford, or you can and appearing in the room, or you can do it remotely via Zoom from pretty much anywhere you want to go. Your testimony is limited to 3 minutes. So Andy sits down when he testifies, and he is able to talk for 3 minutes, and then they tell him to please summarize. So if you were to come up and you want to testify in a bill, and your testimony is 6 minutes, you need to let me know, or your legislator if it's not me. You need to let us know, because what I will do is, if it's on my committee, it's very simple. I'll just ask you enough questions, because you get your 3 minutes, and any legislator asks you a question, you get all the time in the world. Some people testify for 2-3 hours, especially if it's an agency head, like a commissioner or something like that. They get grilled sometimes. Marissa Gillette was on today for several hours. So, but it's important. Now, if you were to call me up and say, hey, I want to testify in this bill and environment, you're not on environment, but it's 5 minutes, but I really want to say it. No problem. I got 150 friends up there. I'll call somebody in environment and say, hey, this is my constituent. Can you please ask them these questions to give them a bit more time? But you have to let me know. And even Andy will say to me, hey, can you ask me this question? And he's not even my constituent, right? Actually, I put a bill in for you this year. Yeah. Which I got yelled at about. Anyway. All right. Does it really matter? The answer to that question is yes. Okay. So you can submit written testimony if you want to, or you can testify in person or virtually. Obviously, if you submit written testimony, there's no back and forth. You can put as much paper as you want. You can put in an 8-page thing if you want. I have a tendency to read I'm not going to sit here and tell you I read every piece of public hearing testimony because that would not be true. But I read enough of every bill that I have to vote on. So if there's a bill goes to environment, never makes out of environment, I probably never looked at it because I don't have to vote on it. I just can't keep up. But any bill that makes it to my committee or makes it to the House floor, I will go through at least a bunch of the opposes and a bunch of the support so I can understand both aspects of it.
Let me say a couple things. When you register to testify, the committee clerk at 5 o'clock on the day before will take all the names and put them in a hat and create an order at random. And so sometimes, on the education hearing on Tuesday, I ended up with a decent number of 45, which meant that I got to testify at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. For appropriations, one of my colleagues got the last number of 274, which means if she testified, she'd be testifying at 4 in the morning, which she's not going to do.
They have a tendency to fall off after a minute. Hey, John. No, doesn't really matter.
Yes, it does.
Well, I mean,
Yes,
you get the same interaction.
You're more impactful if you're there in person.
Well, I'll say this: when you're on Zoom, so I'll tell you, like for example, if I have to, go out and get a drink or something, I'll wait until somebody's on Zoom because they can't see me get up and walk away from them, so you don't look rude. So you got more likely people are going to be there if you're in person. But it's an hour drive for you, 2 hours both ways.
Let me also say one more thing. The best witness I've ever seen is this guy who used to prepare these lengthy, really well-documented testimony, which he'd submit, and then he'd sit down at the table without a piece of paper in front of him and say, there are 3 points I want to make, 1, 2, and 3. And, making eye contact, related it to individual legislators if it was possible. So there are good ways to testify. I'm not sure most people who testify read statements, and I'm not sure how effective that is.
Right? Yeah, not very. All right. So,
I have a question.
oh, sorry. Hi, Jimmy.
So the selection of the numbers.
Alex.
Yeah, it is. And I think the system is straight. I don't think it's.
So it's just coincidence that
No, it's not. No. So the
Elected officials get
And-
lower numbers,
and commissioners.
and commissioners.
Commissioners always go first.
And on education, there's a time when students and teachers get to accommodate them. But no, there are people who are some really important people in the education field who get lousy numbers at times, and it's just luck of the draw. No,
No,
you
you can't swap.
And the other thing is that when you have a group, and I have a group, and there are 4 of us who generally testify, we're not allowed to say we want to testify all together. You have your spots, and you're not allowed to switch them.
That's
Yeah, it's your committee. Your committee may be more
yeah.
liberal.
In public safety, we do things a
You're
little bit
a
different.
left winger,
Yeah, right. Yes, yeah, me. That's me. All right. So comes out of screening. It comes out of public hearing, and it gets re-screened. So we have the public hearings, and we'll go back to the Committee Bill 1501. Pat and I and Heron and Mikey. Paul get in the room, and we say, okay, we had this bill. We thought it was a good idea. We've heard from the public. What do we think now? And we decide if we're going to put it to a vote to the committee or not. And mostly we do that based on if we think it's going to make it, right? There's no sense in running bills that are going to be voted down. That's just a waste of time. So mostly it's not us just controlling things. It's us saying, and that's why we're all there. I'll say, hey, my caucus hates this bill. And Pat will say, hell, half my caucus does too, so we don't have the votes. Okay? So that's how we do it. And by the way, caucus means the people that you are on, I hate to call them teams, but it's the best way to describe it to folks. Up in Hartford, we have 4 major caucuses. You have the House Republicans, House Democrats, Senate Republicans, and Senate Democrats. And so when I say caucus, I'm talking about the House Republicans. Well, really, in this case, the Senate too, because they never show up anyways. So comes out of screening, and we put it to a vote with the committee. And that's where you get a joint favorable. That means the bill that went to public hearing and that we're voting on is exactly the same. Okay? JFS, which is probably more than half of them, is a joint favorable substitute. That means we change the languages. So the question becomes, does public hearing matter? Yes. And every time that you see joint favorable substitute, it's because the public hearing had an impact on it. And that happens more often than not. So the public hearing comes up and we said, oh, okay, let's make these changes. And that's called a joint favorable substitute. And that's why you'll see JF or JFS.
Let me ask you a question, Greg.
What?
So you go into a meeting with the Democratic chairs too,
Mhm.
and you say, I need a vote on this bill. And they say, our caucus is just not going to support it, but they'll accommodate you in certain cases.
So it depends on the
Well,
answer to that question is it depends on the committee. So Pat Boyd and I have a very, very, very good relationship. So if I said to him, hey, buddy, I just need a vote on this bill. I know it's going to fail. I just need the vote. We'll get the vote. And likewise, I won't hold things up. Now, Staffson works in a different way. So if I go to Steve and I say, hey, I want to vote on this bill, and he'll say, no. Okay, have it your way. So we'll show up to the committee. and I'll hit my button and I'll start talking for hours and hours and hours. Now he just wasted a whole bunch more time. So that's how we, I always say, if you're big, you don't have to be mean. If you're little, you got to be a little bit mean. And up in Hartford, Republicans are little in numbers. So anyway, I don't want to get too much into that. Don't give me any more traps. All right. So once it comes out of joint favorable, it goes, sometimes it'll get referred to another committee. So let's just say, for example, we're going to say, we'll go back to my silly example that every car is going to be yellow. And Transportation Committee puts it out, joint favorable from the Transportation Committee, it comes out. But if your car is not yellow, it's a D felony, right? Ridiculous, but just to make the point. Well, we've created a new crime that's a D felony. That means it's an automatic referral to judiciary. So it's going to come out of here, out of transportation, and then it's got to go to judiciary. And judiciary has to weigh in on it. And then it can come back to the House. Okay, we'll talk a bit.
And the most important part about that is it goes to OFA. OFA says there's a cost to it. Automatically, that's called a fiscal note, and it goes to appropriations.
So this is the normal plan, right? It would go to the floor, Senate bill or House bill. That's what SBHB is. But when it gets drafted out of committee, it goes into a new screening. Now, this screening is not the leaders of a particular committee. Brett, can you, while I'm explaining this, can you see if that back to committee? Oh, you got it. Perfect. Yeah. Is that right? All right. Yeah. So here's a good example from 2022. So what happens is when it comes out of committee, it goes to the screening of each individual caucus. So the House screening committee will screen the House bills, Republicans and Democrats separately, and then they kind of get together and they'll make some agreements. So here's a good example of a bill from 2022. This bill started as a labor bill, came out of labor, went to judiciary. Judiciary said yes, and then it came to us for public safety because of the fire department aspect of it. Okay, these aren't mandatory. This is what they agreed. Hey, the guys and girls in public safety deal with this stuff every single day. So let's make sure that they agree that this is a good idea. Okay, and that's why you'll see that they come through multiple committees. Now, when it gets referred to committees, it's a straight up and down vote. So when it comes to public safety, we don't have another public hearing on it. Public hearings already been done. We just go ahead and vote on the bill. Okay, go ahead, back. Brett, thanks. All right. So once it comes out of screening, it goes back to a committee, and then, however, eventually ends up in the House and the Senate, as we talked about later. CNADA, June 4th at midnight. Marked in Shana's calendar, I'm quite sure. That is the last day of the legislative session this year. It's the first Wednesday after the first Monday in June. Any bill that is not done by midnight is dead. So if a bill number 1 comes out of screening, goes to the Senate passes it, it comes to the House and we never vote on it, we're starting with bill number 1 all over again in February. That thing is dead right there. Okay. There's anomalies to that. That happened in 2021 with the marijuana bill, came out of the Senate, never got voted on in the House, died at CNADA. It was very important to the House Speaker and the governor, so they called us into special session the following week. They don't do that very often, but it does happen. Yes, ma'am. Right from scratch. Yep. The only thing that saves time next year is we've already had a public hearing, so we make some adjustments anticipating what the public's going to have to say, and then we have it, but the whole process has to start over again. So jumping back to it, that's the same thing that we already looked at, so just to kind of bring it back. So comes up with an idea, committee raises it, goes to a public hearing, committee votes on it, clears OLR and OFA, goes to the first chamber, second chamber, governors, becomes a law. Okay. Can you click on the 2353 one, Brett? So the website to keep track of all this stuff is www.cga, Connecticut General Assembly.ct.gov. So what I want to show you, so we looked at something earlier. I intentionally picked a very controversial bill from 2023. It's a gun bill from 2023. It doesn't matter the details. I picked this because controversial bills, unlike the first one we looked at, have a lot of activity. So if you scroll down, just scroll down for 1 sec, Brett, you could see there's a whole lot more. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Thank you, Rob Sampson. Keep going. So when you have this, a bill that this controversial, you're going to have an awful lot of activity. So scroll back up for me, Brett, please. Go all the way up. Up. All right, stop right there. Now down. Go down to votes where it says House roll call vote. All right. So I want to show you this. This bill, when you see votes here, right, you see there's multiple Senate votes. That means the Senate ran a bunch of amendments. The House did not run any amendments. There's a whole deal. I won't tell you why, but it doesn't matter. So if you click on the House roll call vote, Brett, this is where you can see how your representative voted. So you go to the bill, you click on House roll call vote, and you can see by alphabetical order and last name on the left is the Democrats. You see this void here, right here. That's where it starts, the Republicans, and then this is the speaker and the deputy speakers here. So this is a pretty party line vote. There were some no votes in the Dems, some yes votes in the Republicans, but pretty party line. Okay, go back, Brett. Back to the last screen. Yep, sorry. Yeah, just hit back. There you go. And then now, so the Senate took multiple votes. The last vote is always on the bill. These are all amendments. So you could see how your representative voted on the amendment. What did the amendment say? Right? Scroll up a little bit, Brett. These up. All right, stop. All right. So these are called amendments. That means that these amendments were voted on. Now we have uncalled amendments, which the reason that you have uncalled amendments is because every amendment starts as an uncalled amendment. So it shows up, and then when you get to the chamber, you can call it. So let me give you an example of what that means. If let's just say I don't like this bill. Incidentally, I didn't like this bill, but let's just say I don't like this bill. I'll tell one of my attorneys, hey, can you draft 5 amendments? And this is what I want them all to say. And then he's going to put them on the system. So that way they're there. Now I get up and I start debating this bill, and I say, all right, this is a good time to call one of those amendments. And then I ask the clerk to call the amendment, I explain the amendment, and we vote on the amendment. And I may not do that with the other 4, depending on how that debate goes. And I want to talk a little bit about the debates. So debates in the House chamber are not people yelling at each other, expressly not that. When I'm going to discuss, so let's just say, for example, Andy is the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and he has presented this bill. He's going to stand up and he's going to say, this is what the bill does. The speaker will say, any other comments on the bill? I'll push a button so they'll know I want to talk, and they call on me. Now, I can make comments about the bill, or I can direct questions to Andy, but I cannot direct them to him directly, because we're going to happen this back and forth. So to avoid that, everything goes through the speaker. So I would stand up and I would say, they would say, Mr. Speaker, I have some questions for the proponent. The speaker would say, all right, Representative Feinstein, prepare yourself. He would nod to me so we know we're ready. And I would say, okay, first question, in section 1, what do we mean when we're talking about the word yellow? Through you. I said it to the speaker. That indicates to the speaker, I'm not asking Andy directly a question. I'm asking him a question through the speaker. The speaker will then say, thank you, Representative Feinstein. And he will call on him. And then this way, we are never talking at the same time. So if you use radio communication, it's kind of like over. Like, I'm done, your turn, okay? And that really never gets out of control, ever. The debates are lengthy, passionate at times, sometimes argumentative, but they never get out of control. The only thing that gets out of control in the chamber is the side conversations at the time. Brett, can you just click on the judicial vote tally sheet? All the way down the bottom one, joint favorable substitute. So this bill came to judiciary first. So what you'll see in here is the members of the Judiciary Committee in alphabetical order, except for the 4 leaders first, or actually 6 because the vice chairs are up there too. And then it's alphabetical order of who voted yes and who voted no in the Judiciary Committee. Why is that important for you to know? Well, let's say I'm your state rep and you had this really important bill that you cared about having to do with butterflies. And the bill went to the Environment Committee, and I'm on Environment, but it never got voted on the floor. But you wanted to see how I voted on committee. That's how you could figure that out. Okay? And oftentimes, and I'll speak for myself, you'll see a no vote from me in committee, which you did here, and then you'll see a yes vote on the bill. And be like, well, what happened? Well, what happened was something changed, right? So bills get amended between committee and the floor all the time. I'll go back for me, Brett. So let's go, yeah, click on one of the top ones. Doesn't matter. So this is one of Rob's amendments, okay? So he asked the Senate to change this bill and make that change, whatever it says. And then he explains why he wants it. Sometimes people ask him questions because now he becomes a proponent. Then they vote yay or nay on the amendment to change the bill. Of course, these were all no. Republicans generally use amendments to take up time because, again, when you're outnumbered 2-1 and you know everything has to end on midnight on June 4th, the more time you take up, the more negotiating power you have. So that's why if you ever watch the chamber debates, you don't see Democrats talking a lot. You see mostly the Republicans talking a lot. It's not because we're more chatty by nature. It's just because that's just how the building works. Go ahead.
And the leadership who decides what comes up on the floor, the Democratic leadership, is aware of the bills that are going to take up a lot of time. And when we get to the end of the session, a bill that's going to take up time just does not get called because there's just not time in the chamber to do it. And so it's a very effective strategy. There is no limit on debate in the legislature. Now there's not the traditional filibuster, but there is the asking questions and the filing amendments, and that's very effective. And often you'll see, as the end of last session, there was a huge long debate on some completely irrelevant bill, and it was only to block other things from coming up at the last day of the session.
Well, yeah, and that's what you're saying, that's scripted. It's done on purpose.
It's
done
tactically.
Yeah. Well, sometimes what will happen is, like I'll be debating Steve Stasham on a bill, and we'll both get calls from our leaders saying, "Hey, we're negotiating another deal. You guys got to keep take up time for a little bit." They don't tell the lobbyists this, but that happens. So then it's like Steve, they'll take a minute. Steve will call and be like, "Hey, you got to feed me some softballs for an hour just to get this time to go by." So this is the game we play, but that's not real important. So, all right. So what Brett did over on the,
I also ought to point out that it's not just a game between Democrats and Republicans. It's also often a game between the House and the Senate.
Yeah.
Where the House wants something and the Senate wants something, and until there's a deal that both happen, nothing happens.
Yeah. So we say that the Democrats are the adversary and the Senate's the enemy, and they say the same thing. So, all right. But that's a joke between all of us. So Brett clicked on this Office of Fiscal Analysis report. So this is what the OFA report looks like. These are now the rules of the House are that we cannot debate nonpartisan reports. So I can't stay up and say, well, I think that this is going to be a potential revenue gain. Well, I'm not allowed to say that. OFA is a nonpartisan office. We have to accept their reports as written. You can't argue their reports. They're nonpartisan. So in this case, they said that there would be a potential revenue loss to the state, a potential cost to the Judiciary Department, cost, potential revenue gain for Department of Emergency Services, and then it goes down to municipal impact, and then it's an explanation of all that stuff. Those are really important to know because when you're voting on a bill or you're deciding if you support a bill, if you're going to call me and say, Greg, I want you to vote yes on this bill or no on this bill, knowing what it costs is important because money is a finite resource too. Right. Go back, Brett, and go to the OLR report, which is, yeah, that's fine. Summary of public. That's good. All right.
You'll notice on that sheet that OFA does analyses, not just of the bill itself, but also of amendments.
Yeah, and the out years. All right, so this is what an OLR report is. Now, I barely got through high school. I don't tell a lot of people that, but I'll tell you, okay? One of the ways I managed to get through high school was when my English teachers told me I had to read a book. I found these things called Cliff Notes. I don't know if they have that anymore because we didn't really have the internet then, but it was this little book that kind of gave you the nuts and bolts of the book, right? And you kind of got through and you could pass a test. OLR reports are basically the Cliff Notes of the bill. Because this bill was like, I don't know, 100 and some odd pages or whatever it is. So you could go down there and it's going to tell you Section 1 has handgun permit exemptions and gives you a summary of what Section 1 does. If you click on this, it'll bring you right down to a deeper explanation. So for you, if you are trying to see what's going on in the legislature on any given day, then you could go to the OLR report and take a look at each little section and what it does. Okay. Kind of save you some time. All right, Brett, can you go to just cga.ct.gov right from the top? Just want to show you guys this website real quick. This is for all things legislature. So from here, let's start a representation. Click on that for me, Brett, and go down to House members list. Representation, the very top left, underneath the seal. Yep. So from here, you can do a couple of things. If you click on find your legislators or congressional representation, if you click on this and you type in your town, your street name, your number, and hit find, you're going to tell it's going to tell you who your senator is, who your state rep is, and then you know who your congressmen are, etc. Go up to representation, Brett, and go down to House members. Yeah, there you go. And then click on that. So these are all the members of the House. You can sort them by district. You can sort them however you want. We'll start with Tim Acker. Just click on view list. Or go to mine. Go ahead. Go down to mine. It's fine. Take 2 seconds. So you can go here and click on view list over to the right. Yeah, don't click on that. You're just going to get a picture of me. Okay. All right. Actually, it's probably like my email or something. So you could go here and say, well, what kind of bills is my representative got his name on? And you could scroll down. Go ahead. Scroll down and you can see these are all the bills that I've either introduced or co-sponsored or put my name on, or that I've signaled to my colleagues that I have every intention of supporting. All right, go back to the top. And you can click hyperlinks to the bill. Let's go committees. Yep. So here's all the committees that exist up there. So you can decide, you know, I'm really interested in education. So let's click on education, Brett. All right, so now here's where you can find out, first off, who's on the education committee by clicking where it says committee membership. And that'll give you a list of all the members of the committee. It'll tell you who the leaders are in the committee, who are doing all that screening. All right, and all of those hyperlinks are email links, so you can email them directly. Keep scrolling right down. I should go all the way to the bottom. Yeah. Okay, down. All right, now, from here, this is really, if you want to call it the file cabinet of the Education Committee. Don't click these yet, Brett. If you click this, this will tell you all the bills that they have JF out so far this year. So if you click on that, you're going to see nothing because I'm on education. We haven't JF'd anything out. But at the end, come June or May, if you click on this, you'll see all of the bills that the Education Committee approved. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. That's this one. Bill record book is all the ones that got referred. So like for me, in public safety, I click on this and I see all the bills that came to us. See, these are the bills that came to education. These are the bills that the Education Committee voted out. This is what's going on. So there's 2 types of meetings, right? You have public hearings and committee meetings, agendas, testimony, and transcripts. So a public hearing is designed for you to participate. At a committee meeting, you cannot participate. Only the members of the committee can participate and the 6 leaders. But all right, so Brett, just click on a committee meeting agenda for me. Pick either one, doesn't matter. Okay, so this was a committee meeting that we had yesterday, right before the public hearing in education. So we as a committee voted, and the public does not participate in this, to raise those 6 concepts. Okay? Pretty simple. That was the meeting agenda. Oftentimes, if we have things to vote on, you'll see the bill numbers there.
And there was considerable debate about the word free in number 4, where there were the Republican members of the committee were concerned that this was free tuition, when in fact that wasn't the idea behind the bill. But because it was listed there, it led to extended debate.
All right. Yep. All right. Go back. And Brett, just go down to a public hearing. Back one more. Sorry. Thanks, Brett. Public hearing agendas. Down. Yep. And just click on, oh yeah, there you go. So if you want to testify next Wednesday on one of these bills, here's how you can do it. This is what's important. So next Wednesday, we have a public hearing on these particular bills. So we'll just say, oh, perfect. Perfect thing. Let's say you want to testify on House Bill 7009, an act concerning the establishment of the Connecticut State Seal of Civics, Education, and Engagement. You could click on this, don't Brett, you could click on this link and that'll bring you to that bill page. There will be no OLR analysis yet. All you can see is the actual language of the bill. That's it. Because nothing, OLR, no nonpartisan office is going to do anything to a bill until the committee bounces it out, for the most part. But let's say, okay, now this is very important to me. So now I want to testify. I want to give my input. You can either click that link at the top that says submit written testimony. Go ahead, Brett. Right here. And here's what it looks like. You put your name, first name, last name. You can skip, obviously the stars are required. You would click next Wednesday's date. You would say if you support or oppose the bill. And once you click the date, there'll be a list. Brett, click one, just click a date in there. It doesn't matter. Go up where it says hearing date and time. I know you can't see me. Sorry. Yeah, right. Yeah, just pick. Doesn't matter. All right. So once you pick the date, it'll give you the choices for that particular day, and you could select one of them. You have to do this the reCAPTCHA thing, or you can upload a file. So you could type it up Microsoft Word and upload a PDF if you want to, or they prefer PDFs, but you could do Microsoft Word. All right. Can you go back, Brett?
Incidentally, I live and die in the education committee. This is the first time I'm seeing this. This was posted at 5 o'clock today for a hearing next Wednesday. And I'm just looking at the bills that I need to talk about.
All right, click on register to speak. All right, so you can testify in person and submit written testimony both, or you could do either or. It's up to you. But if you decide to go in person, scroll down, Brett, for me. You can see you basically just put your name in here and whether you want to be in person or remote, and that goes to the clerk and they'll generate that list. All right, can you go back again? Thanks. I know I owe you a lot for this. Keep it track. All right, go back again and back one more time. All right, now let me show you another little trick here. Public hearing testimony. Click on that. Testimony, yep. No, but don't do.
Well, this was my hearing yesterday.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah, click that one.
Click on that,
Yep.
and then you can.
Yep.
It'll come up with a list of all the
All right.
testimony, and if you can scroll down, you can find my testimony there.
So here's where you can decide.
There I am.
So some people don't.
Yeah, click on that. So there's my testimony when I submitted a PDF. It's there. It's publicly in the record forever and ever. And when you Google my name, thousands of pieces of testimony come up like this.
All right, go back. So you could see there's a lot. So what I would do in this case, I wouldn't actually ever look at this screen because as you can see, this is for all different bills. I usually look at the testimony in the individual bill. I'll show you in a minute. But this is important. Click for speaker order. That comes out at 5 o'clock the day before, and that tells you when it's your turn to speak. So I think, Andy, you said you were 40 something on there.
I think I'm 45. Let's see. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
45.
So there you go. So that's how you get your speaker list. All right, Brett. can you
Now
go-
it's supposed to be 3 minutes,
go back to the
but
CA
for
homepage.
example, there are people before me who the committee was really interested in talking to, and so even though the hearing started, I guess at 3, and at 45 I should have been up earlier. Maybe it's early. Maybe it started earlier,
Scroll down a little.
but I got up at 5 o'clock, and so you never know when you're going to get up.
All right, a few more things to show you here. This is the calendar, okay, of what's going on any given day. So tomorrow at 8:30 a.m., Rep. Dillon's going to have a press conference. 10 o'clock, Appropriations Subcommittee on State Agency Budgets is meeting. Senator Anwar is doing a press conference at 1 o'clock. These are the rooms, 1B, 2C, and Zoom, Legislative Dining Hall, etc. Go back up, Brett, so you can see those sort of things. Click where it says bills, Brett. Nope, the bills, the little tab at the bottom of the microphone with the magnifying glass in the middle of the screen on the bottom. Very, very, very bottom. It says bills. There you go. Type in 5001. Okay, so if you want to look up a bill because you heard that we're considering a certain bill, you can do that. And scroll down a little for me, Brett. All right, so right here, you can see this bill has been referred to change reference. Oh, I don't know why they did that, but anyway, it's going to Education's board to draft. Scroll down a little bit more. Right here, public hearing testimony. Click on that for me. On there. Yeah, nothing there. So if this bill, it's in its infancy, but this is where you'll see testimony on just this bill. Okay.
Can you go back a screen? I want to show you something there. Go up a little bit. Okay. Click on text of bill, proposed bill.
Proposed bill is off to the left underneath that orange.
There you go. And scroll down a little bit so we can read the entire bill.
All right, so this is a good point. Thanks for bringing this up. All right, so this is a proposed bill. Basically just says that we want to make revisions to how we do special education in the state. So that went to the committee. The committee said, yep, that's something we want to talk about. Of course, when it's got Matt Ritter and Jason Ross's name on it, that's what's going to happen. So they said we're going to talk about. So they voted to draft. So right now, the Legislative Commissioner's Office, in cooperation with those two guys and the Education Committee, are actually writing the language of the bill before it goes to public hearing, which is why it hasn't gone to public hearing. Something else you should know, anytime you see Senate Bill 1, that is the Senate's top priority. House Bill 5001 is the House's top priority. So those bills generally make it. Go back, Brett. Last thing to show you on the website, and then I'm going to show you one other thing. Scroll up to bill info and then go down to advanced bill. Wrong button. Advanced bill search on the right. Okay. This is a way that you can find out about bills that you're interested in. So let's just say you're interested in any bill that has to do with a student. So Brett, if you could, at the top where it says and on the right, change that to or. Go down to title, change the next one to or. And then document text, just put the word student in there. Student. We'll just say that you want to look at any bill that has to do, now scroll down and then just, all right, there you go. So there's 225 bills in the legislature right now that have the word student in it. So then you can scroll through and look at all of those bills. You can see the title there, and then there's a link to them, and you can see, whose names are on the bill, where the bill is currently, last action. Right now they're all referred because that's where we're at in the legislature and whatnot. All right, can you go to the top for me, Brett, and go to Bill 2025, change 2025 to 2023. No, the year. Yeah. And then make that say 6667. Okay, so we'll go back to that gun bill that we were talking about earlier. And then scroll down for me, Brett. So all the way down to the dates. Keep going up a little bit. Okay, this is the last thing I want to show you on this site. The public hearing for this bill was on March 6th. Scroll up a little bit. It was a joint favorable out of on March 28th. So on March 6th, we had a public hearing. On March 28th, we voted on the bill. It was a judiciary bill. I serve on judiciary. So let's say you're my constituent. You say, I want to know what Greg had to say about that bill, because I see how we voted on it, but I want to see if you had any comments. And I want to see all the debate that happened on March 28th. Brett, go to ct-n.com at the top for me. Yep. ct-n.com. You got to get rid of that other stuff too. Just get rid of that CJ, make it say CTN. The website ctn.com. Oh yeah, all right. Over on the right. Okay. What did I say? March 19th, 2023. All right. So CTN live streams pretty much everything going on in the Capitol, and it archives it. So if you wanted to see what happened on March 19th, 2023, you can click that play button on the left, Brett, in the upper left-hand corner. In the date, type in 3/19/2023. Enter. Does it not go back that far, the new system? Oh, that's the wrong date. Yeah. What was it? The 13th. Yeah, thank you. That's why it's a Sunday. Yeah, we don't go up there on Sundays. All right. Click on Judiciary Committee meeting. And then hit play. So there we go. So now, based off that bill, you could go back and watch this entire debate All 6 hours and 15 minutes. Yeah, go ahead. Just go for it. On a random spot. So this is the public hearing. All right. So that's Ken Barone. He testifies often and he's talking about this bill. He is actually testifying right there, and he's probably in a back and forth conversation with, probably me or Craig or Doug or somebody, but he's answering questions. That's Melissa Osborne. She's a state rep, so she's engaging with somebody else. So in a minute, it'll scan back to the person that she's talking with who's testifying. The point is, CTN is where you can go back and watch all of these debates. You can see what people said. I get phone calls from people and they say, well, you said this, that, and the other thing at that press conference. No, I didn't. And I sent them the link and they look at it and say, okay, I guess you didn't. That's the whole point. So that's it. That's what I wanted to show you, how to navigate that website, how bills become laws, and most importantly, how you can hold me accountable. So if I bump into you at Stop and Shop and you say, Greg, I think stop signs should be green. I say, hey, you know what? I got to bill it on that. We'll go check. And if I don't, call me and call me a liar, because I won't do that, but people do it. So that's what I wanted to make this about, was so you could understand the process, hold your legislators accountable, and most importantly, be involved. I think oftentimes, me included, 4 years ago, I couldn't have told you 1% of this. And I'm being honest about that. Yes, sir. So that's a good question. So two things that you just made me think of. When a bill is drafted, if it's going to cost the state money. So for example, if I got a bill that says I want to repave all of 95, well, that's going to have what we call a fiscal note, what we talked about. If it costs money, it automatically has to go to appropriations, because you can't pass a bill unless it's in the budget, right? They write the budget. You asked about funded or unfunded mandates. So if the education committee said, well, we want every high school in the state of Connecticut to, plant a garden out front. Okay, we're going to mandate that every high school plants a garden. Well, the education committee and the legislature has two choices. They could either appropriate money to the towns, which would be a funded mandate, or they could not, and then becomes an unfunded mandate. So if they don't appropriate the money, it doesn't have to go to appropriations, and it gets automatically put on the towns. And then they have to figure out how to pay it, like early voting. It's a great example. Right, Bob? So, but if there is money attached to it, so the answer to your question, I think more broadly, is if the bill goes to appropriations, it's probably a funded mandate. If it doesn't, it's probably an unfunded mandate. Yes, because when you go through and you look at the bottom, if it never went to appropriations, it's unfunded. And yes, ma'am. Hi, Doc. Well, you can't. You can't. So you cannot.
You certainly can. You can write to your legislator and say, I think this is a great idea. Right. And one of the great things about that people don't really appreciate about the Connecticut legislature is how accessible these guys are. You can pick up the phone and call Greg, or you can call your state senator, maybe.
Yeah, so you could advocate with your own legislator, but the system won't allow you to put testimony in until the bill is on the system. So I guess you could. Yep, you could do that. Exactly.
You call them and you can visit them. And, it does make a difference.
Hi, Sean. So when things don't go to a public hearing, bills that pass without going to public hearing, all right, there's a few ways that happens. One is executive emergency certifications. So, well, let's take the police accountability bill in 2020. Okay. When they did that, they just came into session in the middle of July and passed it without a public hearing. Now, you could argue that the marijuana bill didn't have a public hearing because that particular bill never went through a public hearing. However, the content of that bill had a public hearing that session. So it gets a little, semantical. The other way that it happens is, well, I'm in the minority party, right? So let's just say that I propose a bill that says that I don't know, machine guns should be legal in the state of Rhode Island, state of Connecticut, and judiciary never hears the bill, never has a public hearing, but they run some other gun bill. I could run an amendment on the floor to add that in, and it could get accepted by the legislature and never had a public hearing. So amendments on the floor and, emergency certifications are generally the only times that you would see without a public hearing, right?
How about the budget implementer?
So
This massive bill that comes out at the end of the session to implement the budget. And there's all sorts of stuff that ends up in there, the paternity of which is unclear. Some of it are bills that did move and never got to the floor, but some of them are things that the leadership decides are important to pass.
So I got to remember that for folks at home, I'm sorry, I'm going to start repeating the question too, but I have to, so the implementer is designed to implement the governor's budget, right? So, or the budget that the legislature is adopting. And it's supposed to be necessary legislation necessary to appropriate those funds. What it's turned into over years, because all bad policy comes from politics is the root of all bad policy. And then the implementer is a great example. If I have a certain initiative, something minor, matter of fact, North Stonington has a bill in right now because there's a requirement to post things in a local Connecticut paper, right? But the most circulated paper in North Stonington is Wesley Sun. So we're trying to just change that statute. Very benign, very non-controversial. If it doesn't make out of planning and zoning, maybe I go to Tammy Nuccio and say, Tammy, just jam in the implementer for me, please, so I can get this done. Bam, it ends up in there. Okay. So that's what happens. The implementer is full of a lot of things, and it's really, I don't agree with the process. That said, I've used it. So criticize me if you will, but sometimes I have to do things to get things done. Hi, John.
Well, let's just talk about budget for a second. We're not going to go into this incredibly complicated process of guardrails and all that. But at some point in May, the governor and the leadership, and maybe including the Republican leadership, are going to, enter a cave under the Connecticut River, chew beetle nuts, and come up with an overall budget that they agree upon. And that's going to emerge fully complete. And that's what the legislature is going to operate off of. And Greg has as much influence in what's in that budget as I do, which is none. But that's the way the process has been working, and it's certainly going to work that way this year because of all the controversy about guardrails.
Sure, John.
Not realize open it, all the paperwork, and vice versa, which I've seen, and I've seen a lot of these.
So John's question is, does it make a difference if you accidentally hit oppose when you support? I mean, it would make a difference if somebody's sort of screening through and only wants to see some opposition or something. But I'll tell you, if you ever want some entertainment, go through the public hearing testimony, because there's a whole bunch of people in this state or from somewhere that submit public hearing testimony that has nothing to do with the bill. Like I read testimony all the time, like, you're all crooks, you should all quit your job and die. Okay, that's great public hearing testimony. But if you read through, there's a bunch of stuff like that. So I don't think it really makes a difference unless somebody's sort of screening through. Other questions? Yes, ma'am. Hi. Oh, great. Thank you. I should have said that earlier. Great question. The question is, how are we put on committees? So what happens at the beginning of each session, after the election day, we serve 2-year terms. So after election day, the legislators come together in their caucuses, right? So the Republican House, Republican Senate, the House Dems and the House Senate have what they call a caucus, and they elect a leader. So the leaders in the House are Matt Ritter is the speaker, which he gets actually voted on opening day. But they've elected Jason Rojas as their majority leader. We have Vinnie Candelora. So I go up there sometime in November, early December, and Vin and I have a meeting. And he says, all right, what do you want to do this session? And I say, well, I really enjoy my work on public safety. My background, for those who don't know, I've been in public safety since I was 15, 23 years in the police department. And alongside that, did 28 years in EMS. So I stay in public safety. And then I say, Vin, because of my criminal justice experience, I'm probably good on judiciary, and I really have an interest in education. I have 2 sons in school. Kids are the epicenter of my life. So I like to stay there. And then he says, okay, those are your wants. That's fine. And he hears everybody else's wants. And then he sort of sorts through it all, and he puts people where he thinks that they're best served themselves, their district, and the legislature. There's a lot of moving parts to why they do that.
And where there's a slot.
Where there's opening. So their seniority matters, I mean, to a degree. Like, he's not going to go pull me off a committee I want to put some new person on there, So that's how they decide. And then there's some negotiating between the leadership, like, hey, we really want these people. So like public safety used to be like 15 people. Now it's like 30. Where do these people come from? Well, everybody want to be on public safety. Okay, that's not helpful. But so now we have all these people. But that's generally how it's decided. Right. So ranking members, what is a ranking member? So we'll go back to public safety. The lead Democrat from the House and the lead Democrat from the Senate on that committee are the chairman. So Pat Boyd and Heron Gasson are the Senate and House chairs, which means that they are if you think about in Republican leadership, Vinny's the minority leader. He leads the whole caucus. Then each committee has its own leader. So the House leader for the Democrats is Pat Boyd. He's the chairman. The ranking member is the House Republican leader. So I'm basically the Republican leader on public safety, Pat's the Democrat leader on public safety. So ranking members is basically the minority party leader on that committee. Does that make sense? So the ranking members are chosen by the leader, the House, the caucus leader. So Vinny, when he makes, so let's talk about House Republicans for a minute, just because it's my own caucus, okay? So Vinny decides, all right, these are the people going to be on the committees, and Greg's going to be the ranking on public safety. Craig Fishbein is going to be the ranking on judiciary because they have the experience, they have the wherewithal. Oftentimes, you don't see what we call freshman legislators, first-term legislators in those sort of positions. It happens sometimes by accident. I ended up as a ranking in my first term by mistake because the ranking had to step away. But generally, you have some experience and whatnot, and people that he thinks he can trust to really run the committee, and who works well with the House chair, because the leadership has to work together.
Yeah. So the big four, the chair, the Senate chair, the House chair, the ranking senator, and the ranking House member, on most committees get together and do screening together.
Right.
It's a bipartisan process. It's not always that way, and it doesn't have to be that way, but it has been in the legislature.
Good question. Any other questions? Hi, Jimmy.
Recommendation that you all folks should quit. Did that go to a vote?
Yeah, no, that did not. Yeah, I don't know if I see the exact one, but yeah. But you get those sort of things.
I have a suggestion.
Okay.
to share with
Sure.
everybody. When you have that number.
Yeah. There you go.
My suggestion from my learning process of testifying, Andy said that there were 45 people that spoke at that particular bill, and you're number 20. So you think, well, you're half the way through it, so that you won't be too long. Except they probably heard 4 or 5 bills that day, so it wasn't just one bill that
Right.
was. In other words, you could be 50th, you could be 80th, you could be 120. Because there's other bills being discussed. It's not just that one bill.
Well, I think the bigger issue is when you testify. So if Andy's number 2, he's not going to be on 5 minutes after number 1, because number 1 could go 2 hours. It depends how many questions we ask him.
Right.
So that's a big part of it.
And the other thing that I learned is if you are testifying, it's much more comfortable to sit on your couch at home. So you showed the network, the CT network.
Yep.
You can actually stream that on your phone, on your iPhone.
Yeah, CTN website. You can watch live. You can watch back everything.
So what you do is, you testified, you gave your test, stream it, go back home, sit on your couch, because if it's testimony up till 2:00 in the morning, you're going to want to be at home.
That's it. So
So there was an appropriation hearing 2 years ago, and I had a late number, and I went to bed. I decided this was stupid. I wasn't going to say it, but my lobbyist calls me and says, "You're up next." So I put on a shirt and a tie, nothing else, and go sit down in front of the Zoom. And I see this slide on behind me. And so I get up to turn off the light. And then I had to tell the committee that this was an example of full disclosure.
Yeah. You had a question? Mhm. Yep. So the question is, what determines how big the committee is? So there's a few things in that. One is the workload. So for example, appropriations is big because it breaks into several subcommittees. So there's a subcommittee that deals with education, deals with the criminal justice system, et cetera. So that's one reason. So the workload itself has to do with it. The other thing is demand, right? So like I said, public safety grew significantly. And when I inquired as to why, it was because a lot of people wanted to be on that committee, which of course I said is because it's the best committee because it's ours. But anyway, but so there's demand too. So there's a few moving parts, and everything's a negotiation. Everything's a negotiation, from the House side between Matt and Jason and Vinny and Tom, and they work that out as to what's going to best keep this wheel moving. And I will say this. Matt Ritter is the Speaker of the House, and of course he's a longtime Democrat. He comes from a Democrat family. He's from Hartford. He is, in my best estimation, a phenomenal speaker. He's very judicious. He is mostly interested in keeping the wheels moving, but most importantly, he has the utmost respect for the institution above himself, above his caucus, above his agenda. He cares more about the institution of our government. So because he's that way, and Vinny Candelora is the way he is, we move along, as Andy said, with very, very little dissent for the most part, far less than you would believe. Matter of fact, I had a young man come up with me on opening day, and he's in law school and he is studying political science, and he came up and we were driving home, and I said, what was your biggest takeaway? He said, the way that you guys are all friends. I said, boy, that's a shame. It's a shame that we've gotten into a point where a 24-year-old kid, young man, comes to his capital and is shocked that 187 legislators that work in his best interest are all friends. That's a shame, but we are, and that's what's important.
So in terms of committees, right, appropriations has, 45 members, whatever it is.
At least.
It's huge. But today, major hearing they were having, and there were 10 members drifting in and out, and that tends to happen. And even on votes, votes take place. Half the members are on Zoom. Others are not there for the vote, but votes are held open because they're in other committee meetings and they get to vote later in the day. And so we have a problem in terms of overloading members with committee assignments. They just cannot participate to the level that we'd like them to.
Everything happens in a few months, right? So judiciary and education are both A committees. They all meet on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So I'm running back and forth from one to the other, all the time. It's tough. That few months it's a race, but it's enjoyable.
And there's also the serious question of why on earth Greg would do this for the amount of money he gets paid for it. Tell him the enormous sum you get to be a legislator.
Yeah, was it 42,000 or something like that? $42,000 or something. I don't know. It's not a lot.
On an hourly basis.
That's a number I don't want to know.
Yeah.
A lot less than if I worked overtime, I'll tell you that. Other questions? Yeah, hey. Yes. If you want this deck, John, is the email on those cards, John? Yeah, just email me and I'll send it to you. Yeah, it's not like proprietary. Please share it. That's the whole point. The whole point is I need people to be engaged. The whole deck is? Oh, see, look at it. See, shout out to my staff members. Man, these guys are great, right? John drives all the way down here. So it's on the website there, repgregcoward.com. The whole slide deck's there.
So there was last session, there was a task force created on civics education. And one of the outputs is one of the bills that was up there for next Wednesday, which is to create a seal on graduation certificates for kids who do excellent work in civics education. That's just a tiny piece of this. This is another really large piece of civics education.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
$20 million bill coming up for the education.
Yep.
Recreation department.
Yep.
With Democrats and Republicans, that $20 million going to be found somewhere.
No. So No, there'll be a formula to that. So education's funded through something called the education cost share formula, and it is just that. It's not.
He's asking about the $40 million that the speaker and the
Next week.
president
I know. I'm
put in
getting
for
there.
excess costs
Yeah.
yesterday. And there's lots of ways that money is available, but that's not specified at this point.
So what? Yeah. So you're talking about the Easter on Monday, right? But before that, what I was getting at is education cost share funding in this state is done by a statutory formula, which is available on the state's website, the state finance website. It's a pretty good infographic. There's some interactive stuff. But what the problem is, and the reason Bill 5001 is about special education is because the special education excess cost grants are hamstringing. The way that it's done is hamstring a lot of municipalities. So yes, we're appropriating $40 million in an Easter. It really hasn't gone through much. So we'll see where that ends up. The language of that bill is not drafted yet. So do you have an insight on how what the legislation is going to do as far as how it's going to be divvied up? Do you know?
What, the money?
Yeah.
Well, it's okay. I'll do this quickly. The excess cost grant is for these severely disabled kids, generally who are outplaced, where the cost to the district is more than 4.5 times the per pupil cost. It's the excess above that. The amount filed in the current year for excess costs from all the districts is about $295 million. The amount of the appropriation for it is $191 million. And so there's about a little over $100 million shortfall. This $40 million that the leadership talked about yesterday closes about 40% of that gap. And so the excess cost is scaled down. So Stonington, or North Stonington, probably gets 62% of the excess costs filed. But because of this bill, that number will go up to 75%, basically. That's I can go on a lot longer about excess costs, but that's
what he does. That's literally his thing. Any other questions? No? All right. Well, I will just say thank you all for coming. It means a lot to me that this room is full, that people care, even if you only care about getting your points from Mr. Massengale. And which, if that's what you need, then just bring me that form. If you could write my name on it, which you should know by now if you're paying it all attention, and I'll simply sign it just so I can get you guys moving.
And I want to say thank you for inviting me. Look, Greg and I don't agree on much in terms of policy.
Mostly because you're wrong.
But when I see him, we sit down for an hour. He listens to what I have to say. I listen to what he has to say, as ridiculous as it is. And we leave as friends. And that's really a beautiful thing about the legislature. That there's a place where you can talk to people who you don't agree with, and you can talk in a civil way.
And I'll be here for a bit. If you want to talk, I intentionally kept this nonpartisan, but I will say if you want to talk about issues, I'll be here for a bit, or you can certainly reach out to me. I'm happy to do it. I just wanted to keep this all about the process, mostly because that's what I promised. But thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
I know.
Thank you for living.
Yeah, I know.